So Boudanath Stupa, and just thinking about the Tibet Nepal Salt Route, which was a trade route whereby the Tibetans would trade salt from the Himalayan plateau with these people in the middle hills of Nepal, in the Kathmandu Valley, and then some trade would extend beyond into India, and this would be the middle ground where products would be brought from India to Nepal, and then thenceforth and then from there it would go into Tibet and then beyond, and from Tibet to Nepal and into India and beyond. So this was part of the Silk Road trade networks. Perhaps we could view it that way. But one of the interesting things is it wasn't just products that were being traded. Spices, salts, cloth, leather, skins, statuary, books, ideas. For instance, Buddhism in its final flowering from India spread into Nepal and then into Tibet. Nepal was a middle ground and had a number of expressions of Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. And during this flowering period, you saw a number of major contemplatives within the Buddhist tradition spend time in and around this very area in the Kathmandu Valley. For instance, the great translator Marpa, who was the teacher of Milarepa, he was from somewhere in southern Tibet, as was Milarepa, and his teacher was Naropa. And Naropa, his teacher was Tilopa, and Naropa was initiated into a number of different contemplative practices not far from here at Pashtupadinath Temple grounds. There were a couple caves there, and it said that he had spent time with his teacher Tilopa right in that region, studying and learning. So this was an area of transmission of Buddhism into the Tibetan plateau and into what have come to be known as the Tibetan cultural regions, where Vajrayana Buddhism is still quite important, not just in Tibet proper, which is a CCP territory at this point, but also in places like Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, and regions of Himachal Pradesh, such as Spiti Valley, and Ladakh up in the Jammu Kashmir area, Kinnaur and Lahore in Himachal Pradesh, and then areas that are now in Pakistan, such as Skardu, Baltistan, Gilgit, Hunza Valley, etc. And then these various areas, Bhutan, Nepal, all these areas have been heavily involved in the Vajrayana practices and in the Mahayana aspects of Buddha Dharma, or Buddha Dhamma, of northern Buddhism. And much of it transmitted through Nepal. And there are still many Vajrayana practitioners among the Nepalis, the Nawari Buddhists. And so you will find that there were key scholars and meditators that transmitted information, spent a lot of time at Nalanda University at Vikramshila over in the state of Bihar in northern India. And then many people would have crossed through this very area right along this route. And remember, there's been a stupa here for about 1,600 years. This is not the original stupa. but there's a very good chance that people like Talopa, Naropa, Marpa would have spent some time here, and then other transmitters of Buddhism into the Tibetan plateau and throughout the greater Himalayan region, such as Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche. He attained enlightenment not far from here, according to one story, in a place called Parfing or Parping. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but in some caves not far from here, a day trip from Kathmandu. And he's very important within the Nyingma tradition, the old school. And then we also have people like Atisha, and Atisha was a very high level scholar, and I believe he spent time at Nalanda and at Vikramshila. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was from an area that's now in Bangladesh, and so he was Bengali, and he spent time. He spent time in Sumatra. Perhaps he also visited Java, I'm not certain, but he was a very high-level scholar, and at some point he went on to Tibet and helped to transmit many Buddhist traditions into Tibet. So this would have been a point of rest, relaxation, of contemplation along the ancient trade routes. And trade routes are always involved not just in goods and services, but also in the trade of ideas and in technologies. So this would have been a place where technologies would have traded back and forth. And also remember, the Tibetan plateau had very, very close contact with a number of the Silk Road cultures at Khotan, which was Mahayana Buddhist, in the Bactrian region, what the Muslims call Khorasan, over in Afghanistan, Tajikistan region. They would have had close contact with, kind of the edge of the Han Chinese territories over in Sichuan and Yunnan. And so they would have been trade of many different types of products and ideas into the Tibetan plateau and then down into Nepal and India. It would have been a very long trade route. And there would have been many middlemen along the way. But certainly there would have been many goods traded along this path. Like perhaps people in these regions had black tea from the Tibetans, or green tea for the first time from the Tibetans who had gotten it from China proper. I'm not certain about these things, but it would be worth looking into. But I just wanted to mention a few of the key figures in the transmission of Buddhism into these regions and beyond. And also remember, when the Muslim invasions occur, many Hindus fled into these regions, into the Middle Hills region, into the Kathmandu Valley, and that's why there were a lot of Rajput princes who came into these areas and eventually, unite the country as Nepal. And this is connected to the Muslim conquests of the Gangetic plains, and from my understanding. And another interesting thing is that in the final flowering of Buddhism, when Nalanda University is destroyed and the books are smoldering and for months, there were so many. This was one of our most important learning centers as humanity, and it was part of a university system that included at least five universities, according to my understanding, that were located in Bihar, in what's now West Bengal, connected over to what's now in Bangladesh at Somapur, Vihara, over in Rajshahi region, and then had further connections to university monastery institutions over in the Chittagong region, the Arakan, and also to a number of very important learning monastic institutions in what is now Orissa. There's, I think they call it the Diamond Triangle, where you can visit at least 3 different ancient monastic universities in that region. So anyway, as the institutions are being threatened, many monastics leave, and they bring key books, statuary, paintings, ideas, practices, and they come into this region, and then some move beyond into the Tibetan Plateau. So now these are things that are better told by scholars, of course. I'm not a scholar. I'm just someone very interested in comparative religion and in history, and I'm sharing my learning process with you. I know I have some nice starting points, but I'm trying to study a number of things, and it could be quite challenging to synthesize it and be able to share it. So I'm just doing my very best. It's like I grew up within Christianity, and then seeking to find the truth within Christianity, and then started seeking out information from other traditions. So I'm very interested in world religions. So I've been studying Buddhism and Islam, and I'm very, very fascinated with the world traditions. I love to follow the path of the prophets. That's what really speaks to me, and I appreciate the contemplative traditions in a comparative manner, and seek to find points that help me to better understand who I am and who we are as humans, and to better understand techniques that can lead to that can help us to purify and be transformed into more mature humans. And I think there is much of value that we can learn from the various Buddhist traditions. And so right now I'm in Buddhist and Hindu lands. I really love traveling in the Muslim lands and in ancient Christian lands, and I've been making videos in these areas, and I intend to make more. But hopefully this study here in these regions will lead to a more fruitful understanding of Christianity and Islam and the prophetic tradition as a whole. There's much we can learn from one another, and that's actually from the Quran, is that we are different languages and tribes and colors, so that we might get to know one another. That compare and contrast is a very important way that we learn who we are, who we've been, and who we seek to be. So this is a place where many meditation masters have passed through. Many merchants, many business people, many tradesmen, and skilled women in many crafts, many different fields. And speaking of fields, many different crops would have passed through this region, different seed lines, different stocks, different types of foods, different type of dishes. And it's interesting that right here in the complex that surrounds this stupa, we have Thai food, Chinese food, Vietnamese food. I just had some Vietnamese coffee with condensed milk, and I hadn't had that in so long, and that was so nice, and it was so aromatic. And Tibetan cuisine, Newari cuisine, Indian cuisine. So, and then a number of different Western dishes. We got bubble tea places all over the place. You can get Tibetan tea. So there's a variety of teas and coffees and desserts and appetizers and main dishes that you can experience in this little area. And it only makes sense that this key place of trade in goods, services, ideas, technologies, would continue to function in a similar manner in this postmodern age. It's a beautiful place to contemplate who we are as humans currently, who we've been, and to really consider, who do we seek to be? And so I continue to argue that we need to be very honest with ourselves, and when we see unhealth and toxicity and brokenness, we need to begin to turn away from that which breaks us, intoxifies us, and causes us dis-ease. And we need to purify ourselves, cleanse ourselves, and then strengthen and nutrify ourselves, protecting ourselves, walling ourselves off from that which is unhealthy and toxic. And we need to seek maturation, and in a holistic manner. So may we be successful in turning away from unhealth and toxicity and purifying and being made whole. May we be successful as we seek truth and draw nearer to actual truth. May we live a life, an enlightened and enlightening, encouraging and motivating life of wisdom and compassion, of honesty and justice as we seek truth. And we live a beautiful life. May we be successful in these endeavors. Wishing you health and happiness. Be healthy. Be happy.